Well, with advice from you guys, it looks like my track plan is sorted. Hi, welcome back to Chadwick Model Railway. I'm Charlie. A couple of weeks ago, I produced a video where I referred to my layout as a boring track plan, and 708 comments later, I've been given some very good and useful sound advice, and hopefully if you've left a comment, then hopefully I've managed to reply to it. If you haven't seen that video, there should be a link up here because that will bring you up to date onto why I'm here today. So what's happened since then? Well, I've rethought the whole of the track plan. I've given it a great deal of thought, and a couple of very dedicated models, people who think outside the box. They're clearly gifted people, saw a couple of ideas that I clearly didn't, and I'll come to those a little bit later on. A couple of obvious things have happened. There is this incline which I use from Woodland Ceilings, which is a 4% incline, and hopefully a little later today a new 3% incline should arrive, and I can show you the difference and perhaps its suitability. I was going to take a hot wire cutter to the 4%, but I can actually just stack up the 4% and that will make a smooth elevated section around the layout, so it's not beyond its usefulness. Almost everyone agreed that the installation of an elevated section that would run across the layout and then over there onto above the fiddle yard would be a good idea. And I kind of hummed and hawed was since then whether to have that elevated section leading to a TMD or a large terminus station, but I think what I'll actually go for is a smaller branch terminus where I'll probably have just the one line going up over the sort of flyover area, and then probably splitting into 3 tracks, sort of just 2 platforms and perhaps a small platform for parcels. So that's kind of worked out okay. I also carried out a test, let's say, with an old Bachmann warship and 8 coaches to see if it would actually run up that 4% incline. And I think the test was fundamentally flawed. God, I can't speak today. I think that test was actually fundamentally flawed because if you have it on a curve, there will be far more drag than in a straight line. So please don't take any advice from me that if you can get it up a 4-degree incline it'll work, because you might just go into a sort of a 4-foot curve and it clearly might not have the power to get around it. So 4% inclines you buy with care, but hopefully we'll go on to the 3% later on and see where that performs. I'd appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel. I notice that actually only about 25% of my viewers do. And also, if you click the little bell icon, then you'll get a notification when the next video is released. So this takes us back to the original Chadwick Parkway station and the opportunities that I have now to make it a more interesting station. So I'll do another quick run through on that. And again, if you have any ideas, then perhaps you can leave them in the notes below, or if you're an any rail user, which I'm not, because generally I'm an Apple kind of guy and sadly I can't buy that product for use on Mac machines, but someone sent me a track plan for the TMD which was absolutely brilliant. So perhaps I need to recommission one of my old PCs and install any rail on there. I think it's about 50 quid, which for a one-off, it clearly isn't cheap, but in the long term with my unpredictable planning, perhaps it might be a good idea. Anyway, let's take a look at this track and see where we go from here. So looking at the station throat area, what we have is the up and down lines coming off the viaduct, and then they go straight through the centre of the station. And then there are 2 lines, one either side, which is your main passenger platform lines. Here's the line that goes off behind the platform, and that was always earmarked as a long freight line that would go right to the back and put an enormous freight train on. But thinking about it now, I think the best thing to do is for me to put in here a got to think about that, a right hand point, which will then take a line out, and then a double slip, got to think about that, yep, a double slip there, which will then take out, this will then come out onto a line here, which will then run up an incline and away up to the other side. So that's the only point work to do there. This point can be removed, and along with that track that would go, and then that would give me somewhere to put the incline and figure that out. And another thought I'd had was this line that's coming out onto the incline, if it was to come up to the where it reaches the platform, is you can, if you levelled it off, you could allow the trains that come down from that small branch terminus to come down the incline and actually stop at Chadwick Parkway, but at a platform with a higher a platform at a higher height, if that makes sense. So you can have a set of steps that would take you up, say, to platform 4 or whatever, where the local DMU train was coming. And there are, you know, numerous examples of this throughout the country. So that's another thing that's kind of up in the air. In summary, then, I need to get from this rail to there, and do away with that line there, so that I can, from the branch line, we can come onto the up line, or from the down line we can cross the up line and get onto the branch. I think that all sort of fits okay. With the rest of the design of this, I've obviously got the up line coming here and through a double slip, and the idea was to make a parcels line here with a head shunt there. And again, I really am undecided on what to do here, whether to make it a bit more dynamic with a bit more track. So that's going to take some thinking. But the first thing to do, I believe, is to do the major track work here before I go on to progress this side of the station area. So at this end, this line here, which is the other end of that goods line, will be gone, and so will one of the curve points down there, which just leaves us, like I say, with the main up and the main down and the two feeds for the two platforms. But hopefully I will have a curving elevated line now to come across, and though I'm not going to use these items, if I can kind of imagine something of this description, please forgive the use of this huge bridge, but that's the thought I've had, is to bring this line out and cross these lines rather than take the line right across to the back of the layout, is to give it a bit of foreground interest, and trains going underneath this bridge section would look quite good, I believe. And then we'll build a town scene here, perhaps with an elevated road section going across here, and then we can put the town scene in across the back. But I kind of like this kind of look here. So, swinging quickly across the gap here that I've still got to figure out, it takes us to the old Chadwick TMD. And as I showed you last week, the dilemma of what to do with it. As you can see, I've just left up the arches so you could get a feel for what it was like. And then behind those arches up and above, there was a town scene. And then right at the far end there was a kind of a cliff face that would take us off into a hillside. So with almost everything stripped off the board, you get a better feel for the sort of size of it. And I'd mentioned using a board here that would take the edge of here out to about here, and that would give me, from this area to here, a 12-lane fiddle yard to feed this. I think fiddle yard is the wrong term, because there wouldn't be much fiddling going on, to be perfectly honest, and especially with a branch station above it, it really wouldn't kind of fiddle away. You know, you just can't get in there and latch up Loco. So I think what I really meant was it would be a staging yard. Now, a couple of gifted people on YouTube, to which I am enormously grateful, suggested that instead of trying to bring one line from the viaduct into this front area here, and then the other line into the viaduct onto this line here, for the front of scene, there will also be another two lines coming into the fiddle yard area, the main up and main down. just turn these two boards around through 180 degrees, and then those two lines there would give you your up and down line, and it kind of made perfect sense. A couple of problems with that is I've always advocated that when you wire a layout, to get it right, you just need to be very consistent, and I always wire mine black to the back, i.e. the line, the track furthest away from where you operate would be a black cable, and the one in front of it would be a red, and therefore you don't get wiring mismatches, you don't get the shorts. So if you wire black to the back, it kind of works. And this layout is black to the back, but if you swing it right around, of course, it's now black to the front. It's not an insurmountable issue, but it is a little bit, adds a bit more complication. Which kind of leads me on to the emotional baggage that I've got invested in these boards. And there's yet another link here to take you to the original Chadwick computerized TMD layout. Will show you what it was all about in the first place before I decided that I didn't enjoy taking this on the road through vehicles and all sorts of other palaver. But the complexity of it and the drawbacks. And because it's in two pieces, clearly there are issues with the board joints. So if I bolted it together permanently, obviously I can replace all these bits of track and get around any sort of derailing issues here. But I think it's the question's much deeper. Is I need to get over my emotional involvement with trying to keep this going. And the time has come, thanks to those two guys on YouTube who told us to just turn the boards around and crack on, is not to do that. The time has come to scrap this track plan. God, when will I ever learn? Is to scrap this track plan and start again. I still need a TMD and I need some kind of a freight operating area on these boards. So in slow time, I'll try to work on that. And again, I ask for advice from my followers who probably forgotten more about model railway plans than I'll have ever known. The other advantage with scrapping it is I have a loathing of solenoid point motors because I don't like them going doink, doink, doink every time you set a route. What's the point of paying out literally thousands of pounds really in sound-fitted locos that when they go through a set of points, you know, you get the Pico gunfire as all the points go off. I like tortoise point motors, nothing wrong with cobalts either. I just sit one side of the fence. But if I do rearrange the track plan, I can take away the solenoid point motors, which again, if you've watched that video, you'll hear all these things going off as train controller sets the routes. But also it's covered in first radius points, which they're not exactly prototypical, if that's a dreadful word. So I can take those out and start afresh. I can still have my nice TMD area with that nice backman shed and a few other bits and bobs that I can bring on, but I can move on. As you all know, DCC is supposed to be just two wires. Well, I thought I'd kind of show you the underside of these boards because we all know DCC isn't two wires, it's two wires off every piece of track, and that leads to bus wires and everything else. But what I thought I'd do now is show you the underside of these boards, which will kind of explain to you why I'm so emotionally involved in I wasn't so emotionally involved in scrapping this particular track plan and starting again. So let's have a look at the underside. Here's the underside of the left-hand board, and the right-hand board is very similar. And it's made of 6mm ply with CLS bracing. And if I zoom in so we can see some of the major components here, and this is the PR3 from Digitrax, and this is the item that accepts the signals from the computer from a USB lead and then sends it out on something called Loco Net, which is that grey cable that we see then going up to this item here, which is a PM42. That's the power management system, which breaks the power from the controller into 4 separate zones, as it were. And so should you get a short circuit on one of those zones, then the other 3 will carry on. A similar looking item to the PR3 is the DS64, and this can control up to 4 points, but it will also do, let's say, 8 points if you do them in pairs. So that's the main system for switching the points. Up top here, there's something called an SE8C, and that's to do with automatic changing of signals. And a really difficult thing to wire here is something called a BDL168. And this manages the block detection for 16 blocks, so that the computer knows exactly what's going on. And as you can see, I've labelled up all the cables to alleviate any worries, really, should you get wiring faults. So DCC is clearly not 2 wires, but when you get into computer control, it becomes monstrous, let's say. Up in the area here, you can see just above that DS64, there's a pair of point motors there, and they run a double slip, and as you can see, dotted all around are other Pico point motors. There's a couple up there, and again all these will be replaced once the new track layout is in with tortoise point motors. The thing to watch, of course, is that the tortoise point motors will hang down further than the CLS, so I can no longer lay this board kind of flat. The cables coming in and out of these items, let's have a look at this one here. See the black and the white cable there, that's Loco Net, and that's the system which Digitrax uses to communicate to each individual product, so they're all linked and you get a positive kind of reaction from them all, that they all know what everything's doing. The command station knows exactly the position of every switch, of where every power drawing item of rolling stock is on the layout, and also which zones are powered up and which signals are in which position. So it's a complicated old game. This is why I had so much emotional baggage with tearing it to bits, because I have put tens if not hundreds of hours into wiring up these two boards. I will try not to cry profusely when I take the snips to it. Well, the postman has arrived with the 3% incline. So here's the 4% in situ, and if I compare that to the 3%, you can see the difference. So if I zoom in a little, hopefully you can see now the difference in incline. That's the first piece. I think that's the second. Then you come on to the third piece, because each piece is 2 foot long, and then finally you're up to the fourth piece. However, with the 3% incline, you get another 2 pieces, which takes us on all the way over to there. But of course, what height will I need? Well, actually, I will just need it to be able to rise up enough to get a train with a little bit of spare capacity underneath it. So here at the end of the fourth section of 3%, you can see that there's an adequate amount of height clearance at the end of that incline. Whereas if I go back to the 4% and then move a few bits around, hopefully you can see that with the 4% there was adequate clearance with just 3 2-foot pieces. Now with the platforms removed and the 3% incline in place, this is where we are at the end of the fourth piece, and there's just about enough clearance to move this now across the main lines and go over the top of the existing track. And now with the platforms back in place, there's the 3% rise, and I'm thinking that after the initial first couple of sections, I could actually then put in a flat section to enable then any trains that come down from the new branch line could actually come down and then hit a sort of a plateau, a parallel section of incline, wouldn't be an incline if it was parallel. And then we could have a platform there before it then continues further on down the hill, as it were. So hopefully that might kind of make sense. And obviously the rest of it would go across a bridge section, which I showed you earlier when I put that girder bridge in place and try to move it along. So that's my current kind of train of thought. So the 4% is now out of the question, though I did think of using just the first 2 foot of the 4% incline just to kick it off, to give me a bit of breathing space either side. So at the end of the day now, I need to sort out my priorities. And I think the best thing to do really is to not build a fiddle yard at the moment, or a TMD, or a freight yard, but to construct 2 lines that run right around the layout. At the end of the day then, I can get trains going, and I can play trains whilst the rest of the build's going on. And I think that's quite important really, to keep me motivated and keep me eyes on, because if I was to do every little bit of track and the ballasting and every little section of relay boxes and all the rest of it, you know, it'll be 2 years down the line before I have an up and running layout. So I think the best thing to do now is to concentrate on getting the lines right around the room, 2 tracks up and a down running, and then move on, you know, sort of 1 stage at a time, and then start moving my way around the layout. So what can I ask from you? Well, I'm still after some answers about the TMD stroke freight yard, and the room I've got is about 5 foot by 2.5 feet, and that's the area I've got for a TMD stroke freight yard as the lines feed in both from this curve and then off the viaduct board. So that's the kind of dimensions. I'm going to use my 4-track Bachmann Loco shed. I kind of like that. I like the way it sits, and I've modified it on the inside so it lights up and everything else. And so that's going to be the home for my kind of Western region 1970s pre-tops diesel Focus. Of course, you know, I can have a freight yard, or I can have a fuel yard, that kind of thing. I'm not going to have a milk station because I don't own those kind of wagons, but I do own a reasonable number of petrochemical wagons, you know, the SOs and the rest of it. I also own a fair few Freightliner wagons. But I'm going to leave the passenger stock alone over that side and really just concentrate the passenger stock on this side and on the little branch line. So I think that would do adequately. So if you've got some spare time and you may have access to any rail, perhaps you'd like to spend a bit of time and perhaps come up with another stunning plan. To kind of round off now, I'd like to thank obviously all the people who leave comments on this channel. I really do appreciate it. Although now it takes me longer to answer the comments than it does to shoot and edit all the videos, which probably isn't surprising with it. I think it was 708 comments at the last count. But please understand now that it's getting very, very awkward to answer everyone's comments. So if it's just a thank you, which I really appreciate, you know, you might just get a cheers mate reply or a thumbs up. Whereas if you're asking more in-depth questions, then I will do my utmost to answer. Having said that, YouTube came out with an amendment to their system this morning, which I noticed on my phone with an upgrade. Not an upgrade on my phone, what do you call it? An update on the system. And it enables content creators, or as we call ourselves, YouTubers actually, it enables content creators to see which people who leave comments are actually subscribed to the channel, which to me is ideal, because now I can prioritise obviously my patrons first off, and then people who have subscribed to my channel, I will always answer their questions first. And people who haven't subscribed to the channel, well, I'm afraid, you know, you are going to go down the pecking order a little bit, because I do owe more to the people who are subscribed and actively involved. And there could be a lesson for you there, that if you really want your questions answered, then please do subscribe. And like I say, as when you ask a question or leave a comment, it's going to be quite obvious to see who has and who hasn't subscribed. So be aware. And obviously it's not this channel, because there are dozens of channels out there that I'm sure you follow, and they will probably take the same view. There we go. People have also noticed that I work down with David Townend on McKinley Railway. And hopefully there should be a link to my previous video that I did at McKinley Railway. And if you watch that, then please look it up. And the YouTube name is just McKinley Railway. And David is building an absolutely enormous layout down on the south coast, with over 1,000 meters of track, 300 points, 180 full-size trains in his fiddle yard. It is an enormous undertaking, and I'm pleased to be on his team there, and I do shoot and edit his videos, so definitely worth a look at that if you want to see something extraordinary. So back to Chadwick, my meagre layout in this little room. Thank you very much to my patrons, and thank my subscribers. I will be watching to see who subscribed, a video here and here, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you very, very much. Take care. Bye-bye.